Hey everyone, for this week's case review for week 4, we're going to review the Harvard Business case regarding Uber Technologies, their growth, their difficulties, and kind of a look to the future. So just a brief summary over Uber. We see that they operate in over 70 countries with more than 120 million users, spread to about 10,000 cities as well. They're growing consistently, revenue size, but they continue to post cumulative losses. Over the last 10 years, they had net losses reach about $30 billion. They're diversifying into different areas. We have the US, we have Latin America, we have Europe, we have Asia. And due to these losses, we see a change in CEO from Kalanick to Kashiwashi and a big focus on changing culture and workplace safety, being more inclusive. And then in 2022, we see this diversify into 3 main segments. So no longer just ride sharing, but also ride sharing, food delivery, as well as looking into freight. So let's look at some of the key strategic challenges. This case at its core really has Uber. How do they move from high growth but large losses towards more consistent profitability? Why do you manage all the risks associated with such a large global footprint and a very diversified platform? Do we need to balance that profitability versus growth? Do we need all three? Does it make, fiscal and operational sense to do ride sharing, delivery, and freight? If we continue to grow, how do we prioritize that infrastructure to avoid any diffusion of innovation or to avoid being overly complex? And this is where the new CEO must really decide, how do we manage cost discipline and trying to potentially shed any unprofitable lines if it's necessary. Look to grow these economies of scale by using their already strong platforms with, sharing with grocery stores or sharing with restaurants or ways that you can utilize that data that you've already brought in and incorporate it to grow elsewhere. And one of the other final big strategic challenges is going to be the changes in regulatory, safety, social risk from operating so many different countries. Right? They all have different labor laws, driver classification, safety standards, different public perception around safety, driver welfare. And both of these can really hurt the brand trust and its ability to grow. When speaking about this case, we are going to focus on a few different theories. So platform theory, one is probably one of the major ones for it. At its core, one of the major benefits of Uber is their very strong platforms, their interconnectedness, their ability to add different things to the platform, right? If we think of, Uber Eats and then Uber ride sharing is a perfect example of using their platform to help them grow. We can also think about network effects, direct and indirect, as well as helping and potentially hurting them, right? The more drivers we have, the more riders we have, the more it benefits, yes, Uber in a sense that there's more work, but it really benefits the consumer more because the more drivers you have available, the lower that demand pricing is. Now they manage their dynamic pricing versus if we see a very high consumer model, but we don't have very many drivers, they can increase the cost for each of these rides, potentially becoming more profitable. So I think one challenge that can go with this is, does it benefit Uber to be more selective in who they hire or bring in as workers, drivers, to make them more profitable and decrease any risk compliance issues from growing too much? And that, socio-technical systems theory fits this one pretty well also, right? It's social, it's technical, and we need both of these to align. And we focus on, that push away from gig culture, wanting drivers wanting to become more employed rather than, a contract worker, other different regulatory issues. This one plays a large role in this as well. Let's look at some current industry trends. Right? Green initiatives and the push to change to more electric hybrid vehicles could impact Uber pretty significantly. They might have a harder time finding drivers who have vehicles that fit these roles, and in order for them and the company to help follow these environmental regulations, can be pretty drastic changes. If we follow that socio-technical model, the idea of issues with gig workers, not just in the US, but in other countries, right? There's a large push for these, now contract workers to be employed, which greatly benefits the driver, but makes it much harder as a business to afford the overhead and to manage a more, potentially diverse employee pool. We have a lot of competition for ride hailing. Maybe not quite as much who do all three that Uber does, but Lyft, Bolt, Didi, Ola, all are direct competitors in different countries to Uber, and all are succeeding as well. It makes it really hard to win on such a large geographical landscape across many different continents when you have those other smaller companies that are, finding just their niche in each one. Another thing, like, how is AI impacting Uber? They've done a lot of studies with current development to try to make self-driving cars to try to reduce the need for drivers or to become more efficient. And while this hasn't quite taken hold yet, it is something they're working on consistently. There's also automation and language support. Can we have drivers be able to use translation material to help between riders? Can we improve our dynamic pricing? Can they improve equity amongst consumers and drivers? So there's a lot of, technology that is impacting this as well. And finally, let's look at some basic recommendations. So diversification. They have a very strong platform. They've already grown into 3 or so service lines, but how can they continue to grow that while limiting their overall risk? Can they use that net infrastructure to help improve operational efficiency and reduce their costs elsewhere? Can they be part of the change? Or can they work, as a lot of other large companies do, with local politicians and lawmakers and lobbyists to help have some say in how these regulations are being created, how these laws are created, so that they can, be one step ahead in helping to integrate with them, and also have some say in where those are going. And I think this one at the end might see a little more help short term. Can we reduce the amount of drivers, be more selective about who drives for Uber? That way we can reduce drivers slightly, still have enough to handle demand, but be able to increase the cost, be able to reduce risk, be able to reduce maybe the need for gig drivers if laws go that way. I think that could be something that could help them become a little more profitable. Currently, anybody can just pick up a job at Uber if you have a car that fits their needs, and kind of dilutes their talent pool and maybe decreases the pricing that they could have with these dynamic pricing models. And here are references. I did utilize ChatGPT to help with the organizational presentation of this. So, final question for the week might be, where do you see the Uber continuing to grow? Is it still in rideshare, or do we think that they will continue to expand using their existing platform long term? Thanks.